Got to get the question up right out of the gate. There. Got that set up. Now I can read this through. Ah, to the next chapter, anyways. Winston was writing in his diary. It was 3 years ago. It was on a dark evening in a narrow. Whoa, hang on. Anyways, it was 3 years ago. It was on a dark evening in a narrow side street near one of the big railway stations. She was standing near a doorway in the wall under a street lamp that hardly gave any light. She had a young face painted very thick. It was really the paint that appalled to me, the whiteness of it like a mask, and the bright red lips. Party women uh, never paint their faces. There was nobody else in the street and no telescreens. She said $2. For the moment, it was difficult to go on. She shut his eyes and pressed his fingers against them, trying to squeeze out the vision that kept reoccurring. He had almost overwhelming temptations to shout a string of filthy words at the top of his voice, or to bang his head against the wall, to kick over the table and hurl the ink pot through the window, to do any violent or noisy or painful thing that might black out the memory that was tormenting him. Your worst enemy, he reflected, was your own nervous system. At any moment, the tension inside you is liable to translate. Oh, if I could get my voice clear, holy crap. To translate itself into some viable symptom. He thought of a man whom he had passed in the street a few weeks back, a quite ordinary looking man, a party member, aged 35 or 40, tallish and thin, carrying a briefcase. They were a few meters apart when the left side of the man's face was suddenly contorted by a sort of spasm. It happened again just as they were passing one another. It was only a twitch, a quiver, a rapid, as the clicking of a camera shutter. Uh, but obviously habitual. He remembered thinking at the time, that poor devil is done for. And what was frightening was the action was quite possibly unconscious. The most deadly danger of all was thinking in your sleep. There was no way of guarding against that. So far as he could see, he drew in his breath and went on writing. I went with her through the doorway and across a backyard into a basement kitchen. There was a bed against the wall and a lamp on the table turned down very low. She. His teeth were set on edge. He would have liked to spit. Simultaneously with the woman in the basement kitchen, he thought of Catherine, his wife. Winston was married, had been married, at any rate, probably he still was married, for so far as he knew, his wife was not dead. He seemed to breathe again the warm, stuffy odor of the basement kitchen. An odor compounded of bugs and dirty clothes and villainous, villainous cheap scent, but nevertheless alluring because no woman of the party ever used scent or could be imagined as doing so. Only the proles used scent. In his mind, the smell of it was inextricably mixed up with fornication. Ew. That's pretty grody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when you think at this point, babies are only had by like government mandate or allowance.
Mm-hmm.
Like they've brainwashed people to just like I don't know, they just ruined it because that's like the best and easiest way to control people.
Oh, I mean, I'm like going around like, what, spooge is your cologne or what? And fornication? Ew. Like that's pretty rotten.
Yeah, like I don't think anyone thinks that's like a stellar smell.
Well, and then only the proles are allowed to wear cologne or
Well,
any
yeah.
scent.
Well, no, and it's because in this society you have like the poor, stupid people, like essentially us, like the working class.
I'm not poor. I'm just stupid.
And then
like,
the party would be think of like Congress, Senate. When do you see Congress or Senate members at Walmart? Or the mall or any store we're ever in.
Yeah.
You don't. They are a separate society. They adhere to their own rules and class, mandates.
Yep.
And that's what he's talking about. Is we're essentially the proles.
Well, then, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, they're just like walking around smelling like fornication and armpit and unwashed nutsack.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't imagine what else fornication smells like.
Especially at this point. They're like talking about needing razors and probably soap.
Yeah, I was going to say they haven't even mentioned soap as being a thing.
Or toilet paper. Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
not.
no one mentions that side effect of communism.
Yeah, yuck. Maybe let's
communal
continue.
Toilets.
You.
Anyways.
Communal toilets. Jeez. Anyways, when he had gone with that woman, it had been his first lapse in 2 years or thereabouts. Consorting with prostitutes was forbidden, of course, but it was one of those rules that could occasionally nerve yourself to break. It was dangerous, but it was not a life-ending matter or a life and death matter. To be caught with a prostitute might mean 5 years in a forced labor camp, not more, if you had committed no other offense. And it was easy enough, provided that you could avoid being caught in the act. The poorer quarters swarmed with women who were ready to sell themselves. Some could even be purchased for a bottle of gin. Ooh,
That's rough.
That's cheap.
You can make gin in your bathtub.
Oh, yeah. And this is like cheap, oily Chinese gin, remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do remember that.
But anyways, it was easy enough, provided that you could avoid being caught in the act. Blah, 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 blah. Where was I? Yep, you could buy them for a bottle of gin, which the proles were not supposed to drink. Tacitly. Tacitly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anyways, tacitly, the party was even inclined to encourage prostitution as an outlet for instincts which could not be altogether suppressed. Mere debauchery did not matter very much, as long as it was furtive and joyless, and only involved the women of a submerged and despised class. The unforgivable crime was promiscuity between party members. But though this was one of the crimes that the accused in the great purges invariably confessed to, it was difficult to imagine any such thing actually happened. The aim of the party was not merely to prevent men and women from forming loyalties which might not be able to control. Its real undeclared purpose was to remove all pleasure from the sexual act, not so much as eroticism was the enemy inside marriage as well outside it. All marriages between party members had to be approved by a committee appointed for the purpose. And though the principle was never clearly stated, permission was always refused if the couple concerned gave the impression of being physically attracted to one another. The only recognized purpose of marriage was to beget children for the service of the party. Sexual intercourse was to be looked at as a slightly disgusting minor operation, like having an enema. Ooh.
Well, yeah, it's supposed to be seen as like clinical. That's why, like it said, like me and you would not be allowed to be together because we actually like each other and therefore like each other more than we like the party.
Yeah.
And the government, and we'll always pick each other over them. You get people who are like willing to do their duty to produce children but are otherwise not interested in each other. You have loyal comrades.
Yeah. Yep.
That's why cults always mix up relationships. Think about all the big cults. They're like, that's not your wife anymore. This is.
Yep.
That's not your husband. I am.
Yep. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're enjoying getting away from brain rot, enjoying the escape, please leave a like and possibly subscribe to follow to the end. Anyways, I'm continuing. This again was never meant to be, or never put into plain words, but in an indirect way it was rubbed into every party member from childhood onwards. There were even organizations such as the Junior Anti-Sex League, which advocated complete celibacy for both sexes. All children were to be begotten by artificial insemination. Artem, it was called in newspeak, and brought up in public institutions. This, Winston was aware, was not meant altogether seriously, but somehow it fitted in with the general ideology of the party. The party was trying to kill the sex instinct, or if it could not be killed, then to sort it and dirty it. He did not know why this was so, but it seemed natural that it should be so. And so far as the women were concerned, the party's efforts were largely successful. He thought again of Catherine. It must be 9, 10, nearly 11 years since they had parted. It was curious how seldom he thought of her. For days at a time, he was capable of forgetting that he had even been married. They had only been together for about 15 months. The party did not permit divorce, but it rather encouraged separation in case where there were no children. Catherine was a tall, fair-haired girl, very straight, with splendid movements. She was a bold, aquiline face, a face one might have called noble until one discovered that there were, as nearly as possible, nothing behind it. Very early in their married life, he had decided, though perhaps it was only that he knew more intimately that he knew most people. That she had, without exception, the most stupid, vulgar, empty mind that he had ever encountered. Wow.
That's quite the compliment to your wife.
Right?
A vulgar, empty mind.
Like, and she's stupid. Don't forget the stupid.
Yeah,
vulgar,
stupid.
empty
That's
mind.
probably how you tell people I am.
No. I don't tell them that. Jeez.
I know.
Anyways, she had not a thought in her head that was not a slogan. And there was no imbecility. Absolutely none. That she was not capable of swallowing if the party handed it out to her. The human soundtrack, he nicknamed her in his own mind. Yet, he could have endured living with her if it had not been for just one thing: sex. As soon as he touched her, she seemed to wince and stiffen. To embrace her was like embracing a jointed wooden image. And what was strange was that even when she was clasping him against her, he had the feeling that she was simultaneously pushing him away with all her strength. The rigidity of her muscles managed to convey that expression. She would lie there with eyes shut or with shut eyes, neither resisting nor cooperating, but submitting. It was extraordinary, embarrassing, and after all, while horrible. But even then, he could have borne living with her if it had been agreed that they should remain celibate. But curiously enough, it was Catherine who refused this. Interesting.
Well, yeah, because like I said, she's been brainwashed to hate it, to think it's disgusting and immoral and animalistic.
Yeah.
But it's also her duty because she's married and she owes the party a child.
Well then.
And so imagine the conflict that would create in your psyche. Like laying down with your husband is like knowing it's your duty, but since the time you were a kid, they've been telling you that if you do have sex, you're a gross, dirty animal.
Well, yeah. Yep.
So what are you gonna do?
Yep. That's fucking whack.
Mm-hmm. It's not a good deal.
No. But anyways, yeah. They must, she said, produce a child if they could. So the performance continued to happen once a week quite regularly, whenever it was not impossible. She even used to remind him of it in the morning as something which had been done, or had to be done, or as something which had to be done that evening and which must not be forgotten. She had two names for it. One was making a baby, and the other was our duty to the party. Yes, she actually used that phrase. Quite soon, he grew to have a feeling of positive dread when when the appointed day came around. But luckily, no child appeared, and in the end, she agreed to give up trying. And soon afterwards, they parted. Winston sighed inaudibly. He picked up his pen again and wrote. She threw herself down on the bed and at once, without any kind of preliminary, in the most coarse, horrible way you can imagine, pulled up her skirt. He saw himself standing there in the dim lamplight with the smell of bugs and cheap scent in his nostrils. And in this heart, a feeling of defeat and resentment, which, even at the moment, was mixed up with the thought of Catherine's white body frozen forever by the hypnotic power of the party. Why did it always have to be like this? Why could he not have a woman of his own instead of these filthy scuffles at intervals of years? But a real love affair was an almost unthinkable event. The women of the party were all alike. Chastity was Chastity was deeply ingrained in them as party loyalty. By careful early conditioning, by games in cold water, by rubbish that was dinned into them at schools and in spies and in the youth league, by lectures, parades, songs, slogans, and material music, the natural feeling had been driven out of them. His reason told him that there must be exceptions, but his heart did not believe it. They were all impregnable, as the party intended they should be, and he wanted more even than to be loved. Was to break, and what he wanted more than to be loved was to break down the wall of virtue, even if it were only once in his whole life. The sexual act successfully performed, the rebellion, desire was thought crime. Even to have awakened Catherine, if he could have achieved it, would have been like a seduction, although she was his wife. But the rest of the story had got to be written down, he wrote. I turned up the lamp when I saw her in the light. After the darkness, the feeble light of the paraffin lamp had seemed very bright. For the first time, he could see the woman properly. He had taken a step toward her and then halted. Full of lust and terror, he was painfully conscious of the risk he had taken in coming here. It was perfectly possible that patrols would catch him on the way out. For that matter, they might be waiting outside the door at this moment. If he went away without even doing what he had come here to do, it had got to be written down. It had got to be confessed. What he had suddenly seen in the lamplight was that the woman was old. The paint was plastered so thick on her face that it looked as though it might crack like a cardboard mask. Holy shit.
That's rough.
There were streaks of white in her hair, but the truly dreadful detail was that her mouth had fallen a little bit open, revealing nothing except for cavernous blackness. She had no teeth at all. He wrote hurriedly in scrambling handwriting. He wrote hurriedly in scrambling handwriting. When I saw her in the light, she was quite an old woman, 50 years old at least. But I went ahead and did it just the same. Sounds like anybody you know.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. That's rough.
Right?
That's especially rough. I feel
Like spackling, just like spackled or whatever. I don't know. Like that is rough.
Well, and just being like, well, I'm already here. Like, no.
Yep.
No, that's not the solution here.
Yeah, maybe just like.
Well, like at any
fuck
point,
it, turn
you can still,
around.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You could have just been like, hey, you know what? Like, here's some money. Like, here's $1.
Ain't
You
worth
said
it.
2.
Ain't worth it. But let's finish this last paragraph. He pressed his fingers against his eyelids again. He had written it down at last, but it made no difference. The therapy had not worked. The urge to shout filthy words at the top of his voice was as strong as ever. And I can't say I blame him. That's pretty fucking horrific.
Well, yeah, he's like, you know what? Writing it down will help. And then now he just remembered it in, like, vivid detail.
Yeah, he's like, great, I had to relive that. Like, maybe you should have just kept on with your dry streak, buddy.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Anyways, I'm going to end this, and maybe we'll just go on to the next one.
Yeah. God.